Sabrina Hamilton, a respected federal judge, exited the event hall with a satisfied smile. The charity gala to raise funds for the new children's wing at the local hospital had been a resounding success. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Her black evening gown elegantly contrasted with the diamond necklace adorning her neck, a historic piece of inestimable value, loaned especially for the event. The city lights reflected off the facets of the precious stones, creating a sparkling spectacle that drew admiring glances from passers-by. Sabrina could hardly wait to return the jewelry safely and report the evening's success to the exhibition organizers. Officer John Miller, an eager rookie determined to prove himself, was patrolling the streets near the museum when he spotted Sabrina. His eyes immediately locked onto the gleaming necklace. With his heart racing from the adrenaline, he approached her quickly. "Ma'am, stop right there," Miller barked, his hand instinctively reaching for his holster. "That necklace was reported stolen from the museum less than an hour ago." Sabrina, stunned, froze in place, her mind struggling to process the absurd accusation she had just heard. Officer Miller, convinced he had caught the crime of the century, was already imagining the headlines for the next day. "Officer, there must be a mistake," Sabrina tried to explain, maintaining her calm. "I am Sabrina Hamilton, a federal judge and the guest curator for the exhibit. This necklace was officially loaned for tonight's event." Miller, however, was deaf to her words. With a sarcastic smile, he retorted, "Sure, and I'm the President of the United States. I've heard every story in the book, lady. Now, let's make this easy, and you can come with me to the station." Miller's condescending tone made Sabrina's blood boil, but she forced herself to remain composed, aware of the curious onlookers gathering around. Miller's patience quickly ran out. "Enough talk," he exclaimed, stepping towards Sabrina. His rough hands reached for the necklace, trying to tear it from her neck. Sabrina instinctively recoiled, protecting the jewelry. "Stop immediately," she ordered, her voice laden with authority. Panic began to mix with indignation in her chest. The crowd watched in horror, unable to believe the scene unfolding before them. The sound of distant sirens only heightened the tension in the air, as Miller, blinded by his determination, continued his clumsy attempt to remove the necklace. Within seconds, dozens of smartphones were raised, capturing every moment of the shocking confrontation. The flashlights illuminated the surreal scene, an elegantly dressed woman struggling against a uniformed police officer. Videos of the incident began flooding social media in real time, accompanied by outraged hashtags. Furious comments denounced the abuse of authority, while others speculated about the woman's identity and the authenticity of her claims. Within minutes, the video went viral, reaching millions of views. The pressure of public opinion was mounting by the second, turning a local misunderstanding into a national scandal. Taking advantage of a moment of distraction from Miller, Sabrina managed to reach for her phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed a number memorized years ago, precisely for emergencies like this. When the call was answered, she spoke quickly. "Code Red Alpha, Main Street, in front of Central Museum. Repeat, Code Red Alpha." On the other end of the line, a voice responded simply, "Confirmed. Remain calm, assistance is on the way." Sabrina hung up, feeling a slight relief. The code would immediately trigger an emergency protocol, mobilizing the highest levels of the judiciary and public security. Now, it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. Enraged by Sabrina's apparent attempt to call for help, Miller decided to end the situation once and for all. "Enough! You're under arrest for theft, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice," he shouted, pulling out the handcuffs. Sabrina, incredulous, still tried one last time. "Officer, you're making a grave mistake. My ID is in my purse. If you would just—" But Miller wasn't interested. With abrupt movements, he handcuffed Sabrina, completely ignoring the identification card she was trying to show. As she was led to the patrol car, Sabrina kept her head held high, aware of the cameras around her, and determined not to give Miller the satisfaction of seeing her break. The diamond necklace, the cause of all the confusion, shone ironically under the lights of the police cars that were beginning to arrive at the scene. Sabrina Hamilton, still in her elegant evening gown, now stood in stark contrast to the harsh environment of the police station. The officers on duty looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Ignoring her status and protests, they roughly escorted her through the dimly lit corridors. The smell of mold and cheap disinfectant filled her nostrils as she was taken to an interrogation room. The cold handcuffs on her wrists were a constant reminder of the injustice of the situation. Sitting on the uncomfortable metal chair, Sabrina kept her posture upright, refusing to be broken. Her mind raced, analyzing every detail of the incident, trying to comprehend how her night at the gala had turned into this Kafkaesque nightmare. Captain James Rodriguez burst through the station door, his face red and sweaty. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Sabrina's imposing figure. "My God, it's true," he murmured, the panic evident in his trembling voice. Approaching quickly, he began to babble apologies. "Your Honor, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." His hands shook as he gestured for the handcuffs to be removed from Sabrina. Silence fell over the station, the other officers now realizing the magnitude of the error they had made. Rodriguez knew that this incident could cost him not just his job, but potentially his entire career. The expression on Sabrina's face, a mix of indignation and determination, made it clear that the consequences of this misunderstanding would be severe and far-reaching. Officer Miller, still convinced of his heroic action, proudly flipped through the report he had prepared. However, his smile quickly disappeared when he read a newly arrived statement from the museum. The words jumped off the page, each one like a blow to his inflated ego. Traveling exhibit, under the supervision of Federal Judge Sabrina Hamilton, necklace officially loaned for charity event. The blood drained from his face as reality hit him. Not only had he arrested an innocent citizen, but also a high-ranking judicial figure. Miller felt the ground disappear beneath his feet, realizing that his career, barely begun, might already be coming to an end. The weight of his mistake seemed to crush his shoulders as he desperately tried to think of a way to fix the irreparable. As chaos took over the police station, the hallways of the courthouse and the corridors of judicial power buzzed with speculation. Whispers and furtive glances were exchanged between lawyers, assistants, and even other judges. "Did you hear? Judge Hamilton was arrested," said one. "Impossible to be a coincidence, not with the Ramirez trial approaching," replied another. The name Gabriel Ramirez, a powerful businessman accused of financial irregularities and embezzlement, was on everyone's lips. Sabrina was known for her unwavering integrity, and many feared, or hoped, that she would be relentless in the case. Now, with her reputation in question, bets were open on the future of the trial and the true forces behind this apparent incident. Sitting in a more private room at the station, Sabrina finally had a moment to reflect on the night's events. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in her sharp mind. The strategic location of Officer Miller, the speed with which he approached her, the conviction in his baseless accusations, all pointed to a meticulously planned trap. A shiver ran down her spine as she realized the extent of what seemed to be a conspiracy. Someone had access to her schedule, knew the details of the exhibit, and had enough influence to manipulate police operations. The magnitude of the plot against her was terrifying, but also revealing. Sabrina clenched her fists, determined not only to clear her name, but to uncover every layer of this plot, no matter how high it might reach. As Sabrina awaited the next developments, her lawyer, Marco Alvarez, arrived at the station like a whirlwind. In his hands, a thick folder full of documents. "Your Honor, this goes much deeper than we imagined," he said, his voice low and urgent. Spreading the papers across the table, Marco revealed a disturbing pattern. Mysteriously dismissed cases, police officers promoted after botched operations, altered testimonies. At the center of it all, one name kept appearing: Blackhawk. "We believe it's a secret organization that has infiltrated various levels of the police force," Marco explained. The revelation made Sabrina swallow hard, realizing that her little incident was just the tip of a much darker and more dangerous iceberg. With determination shining in her eyes, Sabrina stood up, straightening her wrinkled dress. "Marco," she said, her voice firm and resolute, "we're going to turn the tables." Picking up a pen, she began sketching a plan of action on the back of one of the documents. "This incident won't be the end of my career. It will be the beginning of the cleanup our judicial and police systems so desperately need." Her mind was racing, Connecting old cases, forgotten witnesses, and neglected evidence, Sabrina knew the path would be dangerous, that powerful forces would oppose her, but the prospect of finally exposing what was behind it all filled her with renewed energy. "Get ready," she murmured, more to herself than to Marco. "The real battle is just beginning." Sabrina dived deep into Officer Miller's records, her judge's instinct sharpened for every unusual detail. Among the bureaucratic lines of his police history, a pattern began to emerge. Subtle references, seemingly innocent codes, and casual encounters with certain superior officers painted an intriguing picture. The discovery of a recurring symbol, a shield with an eagle and a distorted scale, in unofficial documents set off an alert. Consulting trusted sources, Sabrina confirmed her suspicions. Miller was linked to the Order of Selective Justice, a secret police fraternity known for manipulating the system in its favor. This revelation opened a Pandora's box, raising questions about how many more were involved and how deeply this organization had infiltrated the department. As Sabrina delved further into her investigation, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Seemingly isolated cases of harassment, false accusations, and intimidation against minority figures in positions of authority piled up on her evidence board. African American judges removed from important cases on unfounded allegations, Latina prosecutors facing mysterious smear campaigns, and Asian officers constantly passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified colleagues. Each incident, viewed in isolation, could be dismissed as an unfortunate misunderstanding. But together, they formed a sinister mosaic of systematic prejudice and abuse of power. Sabrina felt a knot in her stomach as she realized that her own case was not an anomaly, but part of a much larger and deeply rooted problem. One night, while working late in her office, Sabrina received an anonymous package. With her heart racing, she opened the brown envelope to find a series of meticulously organized documents. The files detailed the career of retired Judge Harold Miller, father of the officer who had arrested her. The pages revealed a complex web of judicial manipulation, decisions influenced by dark interests, and a network of influence that benefited the powerful. The informant, identifying only as Clear Conscience, included a note: "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Beware of rotten roots." Sabrina realized she was dealing with a dynasty of influence, not just a problematic police officer. Immersed in the files on Harold Miller, one case in particular caught Sabrina's attention. The date and details seemed strangely familiar. With a start, she remembered. It was one of the first cases she had presided over as a novice judge. At the time, pressured by deadlines and overwhelmed with work, she had dismissed the case for lack of concrete evidence. Now, with years of experience and a sharper eye, Sabrina recognized the subtle signs of manipulation that had escaped her perception before. Guilt and frustration consumed her as she realized that, unknowingly, she had been a pawn in a larger game. This revelation not only connected the dots of the current plot, but also placed her, unwittingly, at the center of a web that spanned years. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place, forming an alarming picture. The incident with Officer Miller, the secret fraternity, the cases of discrimination, and the actions of Judge Harold Miller, all were part of a scheme larger and more insidious than Sabrina could have imagined. It was an intricate network that extended from the police department to the highest echelons of the judicial system. Cases were manipulated, evidence disappeared, and those who dared to question were silenced or discredited. Sabrina realized that her own case was not just personal revenge, but a calculated move to protect the entire operation. The magnitude of what she was facing left her stunned but also more determined than ever to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The first threats arrived subtly. An anonymous note in her daily mail: "Some doors are better left closed, Your Honor." Then came the hostile glances in the courthouse corridors, the whispers that abruptly stopped at her approach. Her home was, coincidentally, targeted by a break-in attempt. Nothing was stolen, just a clear message left. Even her pet went missing for a day, returning scared but unharmed. Each incident, on its own, could be dismissed as paranoia. But Sabrina knew better. The threats, though veiled, were undeniable. The message was clear: stop now, or the consequences will be severe. But for Sabrina, each threat only served to strengthen her resolve. She knew she was on the right track, disturbing the right people. Sitting in her office, curtains drawn and a cup of cold coffee by her side, Sabrina faced the most difficult decision of her career. The risks were clear. Her reputation, her career, even her personal safety were at stake. For a moment, the temptation to back down, to choose the safe path, haunted her. But then, images of all the victims of this unjust system flooded her mind. With a deep sigh, she made her choice. Picking up the phone, she dialed a number memorized long ago. "Marco, it's Sabrina. I need you to gather a trusted team. We're going all the way with this." As she hung up, a mixture of fear and determination pulsed through her veins. The path ahead would be dangerous, but Sabrina was ready to face the storm, knowing that true justice was worth every risk. On what seemed like an ordinary Monday morning, Sabrina Hamilton arrived at the police department accompanied by a team of independent auditors. The buzz in the lobby abruptly ceased with her entrance. "Good morning, gentlemen," she announced, her voice echoing in the tense silence. "By court order, we are initiating a full and immediate audit of all records, procedures, and operations in this department." The looks of shock and panic among the officers did not go unnoticed. Sabrina watched with a mix of determination and apprehension as her team spread throughout the building, sealing rooms and confiscating computers. She knew she was stirring up a hornet's nest, but was prepared for the stings that would come. The cleanup of the department had begun, and there would be no turning back. With the audit underway, Sabrina wasted no time implementing crucial changes. At a packed press conference, she announced, "Starting today, all officers on duty will be required to wear active body cameras throughout their shift." The room exploded with questions and protests, but Sabrina remained impassive. Additionally, we are establishing an independent review committee, composed of trained civilians, to review all footage in cases of complaints or suspicious incidents. Behind the scenes, technical teams were already installing the equipment and training the staff. Sabrina knew these measures would be unpopular among many officers, but she was convinced they were essential to restoring public trust and ensuring accountability. As she left the podium, she could feel the weight of hostile glares, but also the silent support of some who longed for change. Officer John Miller watched, with a mix of anger and disbelief, as his badge and gun were confiscated. "You're suspended indefinitely, pending investigation," the captain informed him, avoiding eye contact. Miller left the department in a whirlwind of emotions, but his furious walk was interrupted by a phone call. "All is not lost, John," a familiar voice said on the other end of the line. "We need you to stay close, keep your eyes and ears open, sabotage what you can, discreetly." The voice paused significantly before adding, "Remember, you're not alone in this fight." Miller felt a smile forming. Officially suspended but with a secret mission, he found himself at the center of a conspiracy web much larger than he imagined. As he put away the phone, his mind was already working on ways to undermine Hamilton's reforms without leaving traces. The sound of shattering glass broke the silence of the night in Sabrina's office. Instinctively, she threw herself to the ground, seconds before a barrage of bullets pierced the wall behind her chair. With her heart racing, she crawled to her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. As sirens wailed in the distance, Sabrina realized that the situation had escalated dangerously. In the following days, resistance to her reforms took on increasingly threatening forms: slashed tires, anonymous death threats, and even a poisoning attempt in her breakfast. Each incident only strengthened her resolve, but also forced her to question whom she could really trust. The line between allies and enemies grew blurrier by the day as Sabrina navigated increasingly dangerous waters, determined not to sink. Realizing she couldn't fight alone, Sabrina decided to assemble an unconventional team. In a discreet cafe in the suburbs, she met with Vanessa Chen, an investigative journalist known for uncovering political scandals. "I need someone who can tell this story, no matter how ugly it gets," Sabrina explained. Vanessa nodded, her eyes gleaming with the prospect of a big story. The next stop was a local hackathon, where Sabrina recruited Alex Novak, a respected ethical hacker in the cybersecurity community. "Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to protect our data and possibly acquire some that we shouldn't have," Sabrina said, choosing her words carefully. Alex smiled, his fingers already itching to start. With these unlikely allies, Sabrina was forming a team capable of combating threats on all fronts, mixing legal, journalistic, and technological skills into a formidable force. The first leak came as a whisper, an anonymous email to a few select journalists. Quickly, it became a deafening roar. Records of secret conversations, videos of unethical behavior, transcripts of incriminating talks between authorities and influential figures. It all came to light in an unstoppable avalanche of revelations. The city was in shock, social media exploded with outrage, and protesters took to the streets demanding justice. Sabrina watched the chaos unfold, a mix of satisfaction and apprehension in her chest. Each new leak corroborated her suspicions and justified her actions, but also increased the danger. She knew the forces behind the resistance wouldn't go down without a fierce fight. As the storm of revelations continued, Sabrina braced herself for the counterattack that was sure to come, aware that the real test was yet to arrive. It was Alex who brought the news, bursting into Sabrina's office with a laptop under his arm. "I found something you need to see," he said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. On the screen, a meticulous plan unfolded, forged documents, bribed witnesses, even a deepfake video showing Sabrina accepting a bribe. The scheme was elaborate and convincing, designed to destroy not just her career, but her entire life. Sabrina felt the blood freeze in her veins. Her enemies were about to launch an attack that would paint her as the true villain, turning her from heroine to culprit in the public eye. With time running out and the stakes higher than ever, Sabrina realized she was about to enter the most dangerous phase of her fight. Now, it wasn't just her job or reputation on the line, it was her very freedom. The home of former Judge Harold Miller was at the end of a cul-de-sac, surrounded by a high fence and security cameras. Sabrina took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. After long minutes, the door opened, revealing an aged man with restless eyes and disheveled hair. "Judge Hamilton," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and suspicion. "I didn't expect to see you here." Sabrina maintained her composure. "Mr. Miller, we need to talk." He hesitated, nervously glancing over her shoulder before opening the door wider. "Come in, but be quick. They're always watching." The interior of the house was a labyrinth of papers, newspaper clippings, and maps covered in notes. The smell of mold and paranoia hung in the air. Harold led them to a back room, closing curtains and checking for microphones before sitting down. "What do you want to know?" he asked, his eyes never staying still for long. Sabrina realized she was about to dive into a well of secrets and madness, but was determined to find the truth, no matter how disturbing it might be. As they talked, Sabrina's eyes were drawn to a semi-hidden safe behind a crooked painting. Harold followed her gaze and smiled bitterly. "Ah, you noticed my little treasure," he said, struggling to get up. "You know, I spent years collecting evidence. At first, it was to protect myself. Then, well, it became an obsession." With trembling fingers, he opened the safe, revealing piles of documents, cassette tapes, and old hard drives. "This," he said, holding up a flash drive, "contains names, dates, transactions, everything about the Order of Selective Justice. I was a member, you know, until I realized how deep the rabbit hole went." Sabrina felt her heart race. There it was, the key to unraveling the whole plot. "Why are you showing me this now?" she asked, cautious. Harold sighed heavily. "Because I'm tired, Judge Hamilton. Tired of carrying this burden. And because you might be the only person capable of doing something about it." He extended the flash drive to her, his hands trembling not just from age, but from fear and, perhaps, a touch of hope. As the conversation deepened, the atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense. Harold alternated between moments of crystal-clear lucidity and paranoid ramblings. "You don't understand," he said, leaning forward. "It's not just police and judges. It's politicians, businessmen, even religious leaders, a web of power and control that spans generations." Sabrina felt a chill run down her spine. How did this start? Harold laughed bitterly. With the best of intentions, of course. Maintaining order, protecting the city. But power. Power corrupts, Judge Hamilton. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed. "And you? What makes you different? How can I trust that you're not one of them?" Sabrina met his gaze. "Because I've made mistakes, Mr. Miller. Mistakes I'm trying to correct." A tense silence followed, broken only by the ticking of a distant clock. It was a delicate dance of truths and half-truths, each testing the other's limits. "You know," Harold finally said, "my son, John, he's not bad, just lost." At that moment, Sabrina saw not just a former judge entangled in dark secrets, but a man broken by the weight of his own mistakes. Harold's words about his son hit Sabrina like a punch in the gut. She found herself forced to reevaluate not only her view of Officer Miller, but also her own actions and motivations. I dismissed a case against you years ago," Sabrina admitted, her voice trembling. "At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. Now I realize it might have been the start of all this." Harold watched her with a mix of surprise and understanding. "We all make mistakes, Judge. The question is, what do we do afterward?" Sabrina felt the weight of years of decisions, some made with the best intentions, others out of convenience or fear. She thought of all the times she had looked the other way, the small compromises she had made in the name of efficiency or practicality. "I'm not perfect," she said, more to herself than to Harold. Maybe I was part of the problem without realizing it." Harold slowly nodded. "The first step to change is acknowledgement. You're here now, aren't you? That counts for something." At that moment, Sabrina felt a renewed determination. It wasn't just about exposing others' mistakes, but also about facing her own failures and working toward a truly just system. When Sabrina finally said goodbye to Harold, the sky was darkening. She left the house with her mind spinning, the flash drive secure in her pocket. So absorbed in her thoughts, she almost didn't notice the abnormal silence of the street. It was the glint of metal reflecting the streetlight that alerted her. Instinctively, she dove behind a parked car seconds before a barrage of bullets shattered the windows. "Damn!" she muttered, her heart pounding. Sabrina could hear footsteps approaching from both sides of the street. They had planned well, patiently waiting for her exit. Crouched down, she tried to assess her options. Going back to Harold's house was out of the question. She couldn't risk his life. Her car was only a few meters away, but the open space between her and the vehicle seemed like a minefield. "Sabrina Hamilton," a voice shouted, "we know you're there. Hand over the flash drive, and no one gets hurt." She almost laughed at the irony, as if they would let her leave alive after this. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone, praying for a signal. She needed help, and fast. As Sabrina desperately tried to think of a way out, the roar of a powerful engine broke the tense silence. A car sped around the corner, its headlights blinding the shooters. "Get in!" a familiar voice shouted. Without thinking twice, Sabrina sprinted to the vehicle, bullets whizzing past her. She threw herself into the passenger seat, and the car accelerated before she even closed the door. Beside her was Captain Rodriguez, the officer she had met at the station during the audit. His face was tense, focused on the road as he made evasive maneuvers. How did you know?" Sabrina gasped, still trying to process what had happened. Rodriguez gave a tight smile. "Let's just say not everyone in the force is happy with the status quo. I've been monitoring communications while I'm waiting for a chance to help." As they sped away from the scene, Sabrina realized how close she had come to disaster. But more than that, she realized there were still allies in unexpected places. "Thank you," she said simply, to which Rodriguez just nodded. The silence that followed was charged with adrenaline and possibilities. Sabrina knew the battle was far from over, but now she had not only crucial evidence, but also a new and valuable ally. The next day, in a safe location provided by Rodriguez, Sabrina finally had the chance to examine the contents of the flash drive. As the files opened before her, her eyes widened in shock and disbelief. There they were, meticulously documented, records of unjust actions, manipulated decisions, and shady deals that extended far beyond the police department. The names of senators, governors, and even a presidential candidate appeared repeatedly, all connected to the mysterious Order of Selective Justice. "My God," murmured Rodriguez, looking over her shoulder. "This goes way beyond what we imagined." Sabrina nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. It's not just a local issue, it's an entire system designed to keep power in the hands of a few, at the expense of many. She leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning with the implications. Exposing this wouldn't just be dangerous, It could potentially destabilize the entire political system. "Hey, what do we do now?" Rodriguez asked, his voice a mix of fear and determination. Sabrina looked at him, then back at the computer screen. The ramifications of their next actions would be monumental, affecting not just their city, but potentially the entire country. "Now," she said, her voice firm, "we plan. Because we're no longer just cleaning up a department. We're about to shake the foundations of power, and they won't fall without a fight." Officer John Miller sat in his dark apartment, the bluish light of the TV illuminating his tired face. Weeks of suspension had left him isolated and introspective. His father's words echoed in his mind, mingling with the images of injustices he could no longer ignore. With trembling hands, he picked up his phone, hesitating before dialing a number he never thought he would use. After 3 rings, a cautious voice answered. "Judge Hamilton, it's John Miller." On the other end of the line, Sabrina tensed, her mind racing with possibilities. "What do you want, Miller?" she asked, her voice controlled. I need to talk to you. In person. It's important." There was a long, heavy pause before Sabrina responded. "All right, but on my terms." As they arranged the details of the meeting, Miller felt a mix of relief and terror. He was about to cross a line from which there would be no return, but for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing the right thing. The meeting place was an abandoned park on the outskirts of the city. Sabrina arrived first, discreetly accompanied by Rodriguez, who stayed at a distance, vigilant. Miller appeared minutes later, looking nervously around. When his eyes met Sabrina's, she saw something she never expected to see. Vulnerability. "Judge Hamilton," he began, his voice almost a whisper. I've done things I'm not proud of." Sabrina remained silent, letting him continue. "At first, I didn't know. They were just favors, you know? A report altered here, a case dismissed there. But then..." His voice faltered, and he swallowed hard before continuing. "Then I realized I was part of something much bigger. Something that goes beyond the police, beyond the city." Miller looked directly into Sabrina's eyes. "I want to help. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I need to make this right. Please, let me help expose the truth." Sabrina studied him for a long moment, weighing her options. Miller's offer could be crucial, but it could also be an elaborate trap. "Why now?" she finally asked. Miller smiled sadly. "Because someone has to break the cycle. And maybe it's not too late for me to do the right thing." Sabrina's office, once a sanctuary of order and justice, now looked like a clandestine operations center. Maps, photos, and documents covered the walls, connected by red threads forming a complex web of conspiracy and collusion. At the center of this storm of information were Sabrina and Miller, an unlikely duo united by a common goal. "So the order has branches in every department in the city," Sabrina murmured, tracing a line between 2 photos. Miller nodded, pointing to a group of politicians. "And these are just the small fry. The real leaders operate in the shadows." Working side by side, they began unraveling years of secrets and lies. Each new discovery left them more shocked, but also more determined. "You know," Miller said in a moment of pause, "I never thought I'd be on your side in this fight." Sabrina looked at him, a half smile on her lips. "And I never thought I'd trust you to help me save the system you almost destroyed." The comment hung in the air, charged with irony and a new mutual understanding. Both knew this alliance was fragile, built on unstable ground of distrust and redemption, but they also knew it was their best hope of making a difference. "Let's keep going," Sabrina finally said, turning her attention back to the documents. "We still have a long way to go." Miller nodded, feeling for the first time in years that he was on the right side of history. The revelation came late one night, as Sabrina and Miller were reviewing an apparently endless pile of documents. Miller, with tired eyes, was about to suggest a break when something caught his attention. "Wait a minute," he murmured, pulling a file closer. "Hey, this can't be..." Sabrina leaned in, curious. "What did you find?" Miller spent the next few minutes explaining, his voice growing more urgent with each word. The file detailed a meticulous plan for a silent coup within the judicial system. It wasn't just about influences or manipulations. It was a complete restructuring, designed to give the order total control over every aspect of the legal process. 8. They're planning to replace key judges, manipulate jury selections, even rewrite certain laws, Sabrina said, horrified. This isn't just a plot, it's a total power grab. Miller nodded grimly. And the worst part is it's scheduled to start in just a few weeks. The silence that followed was heavy, with the magnitude of their discovery. They were no longer just fighting a secret organization, they were trying to prevent the downfall of the entire judicial system. We need to act fast, Sabrina finally said, her voice filled with determination. We can't let this happen. Miller looked at her, seeing in her not just an ally, but a leader. Where do we start? Sabrina stood up, her fatigue momentarily forgotten. First, we need more proof. Then, we're going to need allies. Lots of allies. As they began to plan their next move, both knew they were about to enter the most dangerous and crucial phase of their mission. The night was late when Miller arrived home, exhausted after another day of secret investigations with Sabrina. As he entered his apartment, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Hello, John. A familiar voice sounded from the darkness. The light turned on, revealing his former mentor and senior member of the Order, Captain Graves. Miller froze, his heart racing. Captain, Spare me the explanations, Graves interrupted, his voice cold. We know what you've been doing. The question is, are you ready to get back on the right side? For a moment, Miller hesitated. His mind returned to the years of loyalty, the promises of power and protection. It would be so easy to say yes, to return to the safety of what he knew. But then, the images of the last few weeks flooded his mind. The truths he had discovered, the injustices he had helped perpetuate. Sabrina's face, trusting him despite everything. No, Miller finally said, his voice firm. I'm already on the right side. Graves sighed, disappointed. You know what that means, don't you? Miller nodded, feeling a mix of fear and a strange sense of freedom. But it means I'm finally doing the right thing. As Graves got up to leave, Miller knew he had just burned his last bridges with his past. But for the first time in years, he felt at peace with his choices. Days turned into frenetic weeks of investigation. Sabrina and Miller, now working in almost perfect sync, plunged into the depths of the plot. Each new discovery took them deeper into the underworld of manipulation and secrets. Secret documents were recovered from hidden safes, incriminating conversations were recorded with hidden microphones, and reluctant informants were persuaded to speak. But with each step forward, the dangers increased. Miller was nearly discovered during an infiltration operation at an exclusive Order club. Sabrina barely escaped an accident that clearly had nothing accidental about it. They're getting desperate, Miller commented one night, applying ice to a recent bruise. That means we're getting close. Sabrina nodded, her eyes scanning the latest evidence they had collected. But it also means time is running out. We need to act before they catch us, or worse. The tension was palpable, each day bringing new risks and shocking revelations. But amid the chaos and danger, something unexpected was blooming. A mutual trust and respect that neither had ever imagined possible. You know, Miller said, breaking a moment of concentrated silence, when all this is over, if we survive, I think I'll miss this. Sabrina looked at him, surprised, before giving a small smile. Who would have thought I'd agree with you on something, Miller? The moment of lightness was brief but strengthening. Both knew that the final battle was approaching, and that they would need each other more than ever to face what was to come. The plan was finally taking shape. After weeks of tireless work, Sabrina and Miller had gathered enough evidence to expose the entire network of manipulation. A press conference was scheduled, documents were organized, and trusted allies were strategically positioned. On the eve of the big day, Sabrina received an anonymous call. "Hey, be careful who you trust," the voice said before abruptly hanging up. Uneasy, Sabrina decided to make one last security check. That's when she discovered that the most crucial files were missing. Panicking, she called Miller, but it went straight to voicemail. Her next thought was Rodriguez, but upon arriving at the arranged meeting place, Sabrina found herself surrounded by corrupt officers. "I'm sorry, Sabrina." Rodriguez's voice sounded behind her. "Hey, but you've gone too far." The shock of betrayal hit her like a punch. Rodriguez, Her oldest and most trusted ally had been a double agent all along. As she was taken away, Sabrina struggled to process what had happened. The entire operation, months of work and risks, everything seemed to be falling apart. But amid the chaos and despair, one thought persisted. Where was Miller? Had he also betrayed her, or was he in danger? With the future uncertain and time running out, Sabrina knew she had to find a way out. The truth needed to come to light, no matter the cost. The courtroom was packed, TV cameras strategically positioned to capture every moment. Sabrina Hamilton, with firm posture and a determined look, stepped up to the podium. The silence was palpable as she opened her folder. "Your Honor, members of the jury, American people," she began, her voice echoing through the loudspeakers. "What I will present today is not just a case of manipulation. It's the exposure of a conspiracy that threatens the very foundations of our democracy." Methodically, Sabrina unraveled a complex web of evidence, encrypted emails, financial records, incriminating audio recordings. Each revelation provoked shocked murmurs in the gallery and among millions of viewers at home. As the hours passed, it became clear that this was not just another trial. It was a historic moment that would change the course of the nation. As Sabrina presented her evidence inside the courtroom, chaos was unfolding in the streets. Members of the police fraternity, many still in uniform, led protests that quickly turned violent. Barricades were erected around the courthouse, but the protesters attacked them with blind fury. Shouts of "liar" and "traitor" echoed through the enraged crowd. Inside, the sound of breaking glass and sirens periodically interrupted the testimony. Jurors exchanged nervous glances, while loyal officers struggled to maintain order. Sabrina, though visibly shaken, maintained her composure. "This," she said, pointing to the turmoil outside, "is the sound of fear of the truth we are exposing here today." The judge, realizing the gravity of the situation, ordered the jury to be sequestered. The trial would continue, no matter the cost. John Miller took the witness stand, his face a mask of determination and remorse. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. "My name is John Miller," he began, his voice trembling, "and I was part of the Order of Selective Justice." In the following minutes, Miller unraveled a shocking story of systematic manipulation. He detailed forged documents, intimidated witnesses. Each revelation was a dagger to the heart of the system he once swore to protect. "I'm not proud of what I did," Miller concluded, tears in his eyes. But I'm here today to do the right thing, no matter the personal cost." The courtroom was in shock. Even the most skeptical couldn't deny the authenticity of his testimony. The truth, at last, was coming to light. Chaos erupted in the middle of the trial. A gunshot echoed through the courtroom, followed by panicked screams. Sabrina dove to the floor as security surrounded the judge and jurors. Amid the confusion, Miller grabbed Sabrina, pulling her behind an overturned table. "Stay down," he shouted, his police instincts taking over. More shots were heard, coming from different directions. It was clear that multiple shooters had infiltrated the courtroom. "They're desperate," Sabrina murmured, her heart pounding. "This proves we're getting close to the truth." As the SWAT team stormed in, Sabrina and Miller exchanged determined looks. They had come too far to give up now. The trial had to continue, no matter the cost. After the chaos was contained, Sabrina stood up, straightening her torn blazer. The cameras, which never stopped rolling, focused on her. "Americans," she began, her voice firm despite the recent events, "you just witnessed the desperation of those who fear the truth." With passionate eloquence, Sabrina exposed the full extent of the conspiracy. She named names, revealed schemes, and showed how manipulation had infiltrated every level of government. "This is not just a trial," she concluded, her eyes shining with determination. "It's a call to reclaim our democracy." Millions watched, mesmerized. At that moment, Sabrina was not just a prosecutor, but the voice of a nation crying out for justice. The trial's revelations triggered an unprecedented wave of action. FBI teams raided government offices, courthouses, and police stations across the country. Powerful politicians were escorted out in handcuffs before the cameras. Renowned judges saw their robes traded for prison uniforms. Police chiefs, once untouchable, were taken into custody. The nation watched in shock as figures who once seemed above the law faced justice. Each new arrest sent shockwaves through the system. Amid the turmoil, Sabrina and Miller watched with a mix of satisfaction and apprehension. They had initiated something much larger than themselves, a cleanup that shook the very foundations of power. The question that remained was, what would come next? The courtroom was deathly silent as the judge prepared to read the verdict. Weeks of testimony, evidence, and deliberations culminated in this moment. 8 in the case of the people versus the order of selective justice. The judge began, his voice resonating. This court finds the defendants guilty on all charges. The room erupted in a mix of applause and shouts of indignation. On the streets, crowds celebrated while others furiously protested. Sabrina and Miller exchanged looks of relief and disbelief. They had achieved the impossible. But as the dust settled, it became clear that this verdict was only the beginning. An entire nation now faced the difficult task of rebuilding trust in its institutions and reforging a truly just system. The trial of the century was over, but its effects would reverberate for generations. Months after the historic trial, Sabrina Hamilton found herself at the helm of a monumental task. Appointed to lead the National Justice Reform Commission, she now faced the challenge of rebuilding a system shaken to its core. Endless meetings, heated debates, and sleepless nights became her new routine. Sabrina insisted on fundamental changes, from revising the selection processes for judges to implementing independent oversight systems for the police. "We're not just fixing a broken system," she declared in a congressional session. "We're reimagining what justice truly means in our society." Each proposal faced resistance, but Sabrina remained unwavering. She knew that the nation's future depended on the success of this reform. John Miller was released from prison 3 years after the trial, his sentence reduced in exchange for his cooperation. The morning sun momentarily blinded him as he took his first steps in freedom. Determined to atone for his past mistakes, Miller dove headfirst into activism for police reform. He began by giving lectures at police academies, sharing his story as a cautionary tale. "I was the worst of the police force," he would tell cadets. "Now I want to help shape the best." His words, laden with genuine regret and hope for the future, resonated deeply. Miller became a respected voice in the reform movement, his personal experience adding weight to his words. The revelation came during a surprising press conference. Sabrina, holding the famous diamond necklace, explained the shocking truth behind the jewelry. "This necklace was not just a museum piece," she announced. "Each diamond contains a microchip with crucial data about the manipulation network." The room exploded with questions as Sabrina detailed how advanced technology had been used to hide evidence in plain sight. The necklace, seemingly a symbol of status and beauty, was actually an ultra-secret storage device. This revelation not only explained the Order's obsession with the necklace, but also highlighted the level of sophistication in the plot that Sabrina and Miller had dismantled. Despite the success of the trial, Sabrina continued to be a target. Anonymous threats arrived regularly, forcing her to live under constant protection. However, for every threat, hundreds of messages of support flooded her office. Ordinary citizens organized solidarity vigils, and supportive hashtags dominated social media. During a public speech, a protester attempted to attack her but was quickly restrained by the crowd. Sabrina, unfazed, continued speaking. "These acts of intimidation only prove that our work is having an impact," she declared, her voice firm. "We will not back down." The incident only strengthened public support. Sabrina had become more than a legal figure. She was now a symbol of resistance and integrity. Police academies and law schools across the country experienced a radical transformation. New curricula, developed under Sabrina's commission, placed ethics and accountability at the heart of training. Police cadets now underwent intensive simulations of ethical dilemmas, while law students were challenged with complex social justice cases. "We are not just training professionals, but guardians of justice," declared the new director of the National Police Academy. The selection process became more rigorous, with extensive psychological evaluations and deep background checks. The emphasis was on cultivating a culture of integrity and service. This new approach faced initial resistance, but soon began producing a generation of more conscientious and ethical officers and judges. In a surprising twist of fate, Sabrina and Miller teamed up once again. this time to heal the wounds between the police and the communities most affected by the manipulations. Their program, Bridges for Trust, brought police officers and community members together and facilitated dialogues and collaborative projects. "We can't just impose changes from the top down," Miller explained in a session. "True reform begins with mutual understanding," Sabrina added, "and with the courage to confront past wrongs and work together for a better future." The program faced initial skepticism, but gradually began showing promising results. Slowly, trust began to be rebuilt, one difficult conversation at a time. 10 years after the trial that shook the nation, an older but still determined Sabrina looked out at the changes that had occurred. Statistics showed a significant reduction in police and judicial injustice. Public trust in justice institutions had increased considerably. However, challenges persisted. Attempts to subvert the new regulations periodically arose, and old habits sometimes resurfaced. "Our work will never truly be finished," Sabrina reflected in her memoirs. "But every step toward true justice is worth it." Miller, now a respected ethics advisor, agreed. "We transformed a system, but more importantly, we changed mindsets." The legacy of their fight continued to inspire a new generation committed to justice and integrity.